5 dark secrets of the medieval Inquisition you didn't know in the dimly lit corridors of history. There are chapters so drenched in fear and silence that they still echo across the centuries. Among them, none is darker, more haunting, or more shrouded in secrecy than the medieval Inquisition. It was not just a court of lit, it was an empire of terror where faith was weaponized. Suspicion turned neighbor against neighbor, and the very whisper of doubt could lead to chains, fire, or death. Imagine living in a world where every thought, every word, every book you owned could betray you. Where the shadows of the church were longer than the reach of kings, and where salvation itself was twisted into a cruel justification for pain. The Inquisition was not confined to Spain or Italy alone. It crept through Europe like a slow-burning fire, consuming heretics, mystics, and visionaries alike. But beyond the familiar tales of torture and trials lie deeper, more sinister truths. Secrets buried in archives, hidden in forbidden manuscripts, whispered in fear by survivors. These secrets reveal a side of the Inquisition few dare to confront, a system not only of faith, but of power, control, and silence. In this video, we will uncover 5 dark secrets of the medieval Inquisition you didn't know. Each revelation will take you closer to understanding how terror was carefully crafted, how knowledge was extinguished, and how the echoes of those brutal centuries still haunt us today. So light a candle, steel your nerves, and step with me into the shadows of history. For what you are about to hear is not just history, it is a warning carved into the bones of time itself. Secret 1: The origins of fear. The Inquisition did not appear suddenly, nor was it born only from Spain's shadowy courts. Its roots reached deep into the soil of medieval Europe, nourished by centuries of anxiety, suspicion, and the Church's relentless desire for control. In the 12th century, heretical movements like the Cathars in southern France and the Waldensians in Italy challenged the authority of Rome to the common people. These groups offered a return to simple faith, free from the corruption of wealth and hierarchy. But to the Church, they represented a dangerous rebellion, a crack in the sacred order that could shatter Christendom itself. And so, the machinery of fear was set into motion. Pope Innocent III authorized the first official inquisitors, men of the cloth, armed not with swords, but with the authority to question, to accuse, and to condemn. Their mission was not just to punish, but to instill terror so profound that even whispers of doubt would wither on the tongue. To resist the Inquisition was to resist God himself, so the faithful were told. What few realize is that the Inquisition was never simply about theology. From the very beginning, it was a weapon of consolidation. It allowed the Church to tighten its grip on monarchs, on nobles, and on the peasantry alike. By labeling opponents as heretics, inquisitors erased political enemies as easily as they condemned spiritual rebels. Fear became a currency, traded in hushed confessions and public executions. The origins of the Inquisition, then, are not only about heresy, they are about power, about silencing those who dreamed of freedom, and about creating a culture where fear itself was the greatest prison. This was the foundation upon which centuries of terror would be built, a legacy that began not with fire and torture, but with a simple, chilling idea that belief could be policed and salvation could be enforced. Secret 2: Torture in the name of faith. If the origins of the Inquisition were rooted in fear, its power was cemented in pain. The inquisitors did not merely question, they extracted obedience through suffering, wrapping cruelty in the language of salvation. To them, torture was not punishment, it was purification. By inflicting agony, they claimed to cleanse the soul and force confessions that would save the heretic from eternal damnation. But beneath this pious mask lurked instruments of horror. The rack, stretching limbs until joints cracked like dry wood. The strappado, where victims were hoisted by the arms and dropped suddenly, tearing shoulders from their sockets. The iron boot, crushing bones with methodical precision. Even the water ordeal, where drowning was disguised as baptism, became a grotesque ritual of faith twisted into torment. What makes this secret darker still is the way torture was rationalized. The Church decreed that pain was permissible as long as it stopped short of taking life or shedding blood. And so, inquisitors became masters of prolonging agony without delivering death-suspending victims on the edge of despair, wringing from them the words needed to justify the verdict already decided. Confessions obtained under such torment were paraded as proof of righteousness. Heretics admitted to consorting with the devil, to worshipping false idols, to blasphemies they had never dreamed of. And once these words were spoken, there was no return. The sentence was sealed, the stake prepared, and the crowd summoned to witness justice in flames. This was torture in the name of faith, an unholy fusion of religion and cruelty, where salvation became indistinguishable from suffering. It created a world where truth was irrelevant, where innocence offered no protection, and where the cries of the broken were muffled by the chants of prayer. The Inquisition's instruments were not just tools of pain, they were tools of control, reminding all who watched that the Church could reach not only into your soul, but into your very flesh. Secret 3. The forbidden books and knowledge. The Inquisition did not only hunt bodies, it hunted minds. Beyond chains and dungeons, its reach extended into libraries, workshops, and the private studies of scholars. For knowledge itself was seen as a threat, a spark that could ignite rebellion against dogma. And so, books became as dangerous as blades, and words were treated like weapons of heresy. Entire categories of thought were forbidden. Texts of philosophy that questioned the Church's authority, medical treatises that contradicted Scripture, even translations of the Bible into the common tongue, all were declared dangerous. To read them was to risk suspicion. To own them was to invite interrogation. To share them was to sign one's own death warrant. The Inquisition enforced its will with fire. Countless manuscripts were seized and cast into flames in public squares, their ashes rising like the ghosts of silenced voices. Scribes who dared preserve forbidden works were branded heretics. Scholars who pursued hidden knowledge were dragged before tribunals, their brilliance reduced to confessions of guilt under the threat of torture. Even the printing press, when it arrived, was met with suspicion, for its power to spread ideas threatened to loosen the Church's grip on truth. But what makes this secret most haunting is not only the destruction, it is what was lost. Entire bodies of knowledge vanished, remedies for disease, records of ancient civilizations, mystical philosophies, and radical visions of freedom. Whole generations were denied ideas that might have changed the course of history. The Inquisition's war on books was not simply censorship. It was an attempt to control reality itself, to dictate what could be thought, what could be imagined, and what could be remembered. In silencing words, the Inquisition silenced possibilities. And the greatest tragedy is that we may never know the full extent of what was erased. Each burned page was more than parchment. It was a heartbeat of human curiosity, extinguished in the name of faith. Secret 4. The politics behind the trials. Though cloaked in the language of salvation, the Inquisition was never purely about faith. From the very beginning, it was also a weapon of politics, a tool sharpened to silence dissent, to intimidate rivals, and to reshape power across medieval Europe. The trials may have invoked God, but their true verdict often served kings, nobles, and bishops who stood to gain from fear. Accusations of heresy became convenient instruments for ambition. A wealthy merchant who opposed local lords could suddenly be branded a blasphemer. A rival noble might be accused of harboring forbidden beliefs, his land swiftly confiscated once guilt was declared. Even monarchs found the Inquisition useful, aligning themselves with the Church to crush rebellion while cloaking their violence and piety. Behind the courtroom walls, political bargains whispered louder than prayers. Inquisitors were not immune to bribes, and confessions obtained under torture could be tailored to implicate enemies. Heresy trials became stages upon which entire dynasties were dismantled, fortunes seized, and reputations destroyed. It was less about saving souls and more about tightening chains. One of the darkest truths was how ordinary people were drawn into this web. Neighbors denounced neighbors, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of envy, sometimes to eliminate a competitor. The Inquisition thrived on suspicion, feeding an atmosphere where loyalty was measured not in truth, but in accusations. In such a world, silence became dangerous, and survival often meant pointing a trembling finger before it was pointed at you. The trials were less about divine justice than about earthly control. Every execution in the town square sent two messages. One to the crowd that obedience was mandatory, and another to those in power that their grip had tightened. The Inquisition's politics were not confined to altars and pulpits, they seeped into thrones, marketplaces, and homes, ensuring that fear served not only God but those who ruled in His name. Secret 5. The Legacy of Terror. When the fires of the Inquisition finally dimmed, its shadows did not vanish. They lingered, stretching far beyond the dungeons and tribunals, etched into the collective memory of Europe. The true legacy of the Inquisition was not merely the bodies it burned, or the books. It destroyed it was the culture of fear it left behind. For centuries, entire communities lived under the weight of silence. Families remembered the knock on the door at midnight, the disappearance of a father, the public humiliation of a mother, the whispered warning to children never to speak their thoughts aloud. 8. This generational trauma carved deep scars, teaching obedience not through faith, but through terror. Even after the tribunals dissolved, their influence lingered in the structures of authority. States learned from the Inquisition how fear could unify a population, how suspicion could fracture resistance, and how public punishment could cement power. The Church may have claimed to protect the purity of souls, but rulers saw how easily such fear could be harnessed for earthly dominance. Perhaps most chilling is how the logic of the Inquisition survived long after its institutions crumbled. The idea that belief can be policed, that truth can be dictated, and that dissent can be silenced by force, these patterns reappeared in witch hunts, in religious wars, even in the political purges of the modern era. The echo of the Inquisition's cruelty can still be heard whenever freedom of thought is crushed beneath authority. Its legacy is not confined to dusty chronicles. It is present in our unease, in our stories of haunted faith and cursed power. The Inquisition teaches us that once terror is unleashed in the name of righteousness, it never truly dies. It only waits for a new mask to wear. And so, its ghosts walk beside us still, reminding us that the darkest prisons are not always made of stone, but of fear carved into the human heart. The Medieval Inquisition stands as one of history's most chilling reminders of how faith, twisted by fear and power, can become a weapon sharper than any blade. We began with its origins, born from suspicion and the Church's hunger for control. We descended into its torture chambers, where pain was sanctified in the name of salvation. We watched as books and politics hidden behind the trials, where ambition thrived under the guise of piety. And finally, we faced its enduring legacy of terror, a shadow that still haunts the human story. Each of these 5 secrets reveals more than cruelty. They reveal the fragility of freedom, the dangers of unchecked authority, and the ease with which truth can be strangled when fear rules. The Inquisition is not just a chapter sealed in medieval dust, it is a warning. A reminder that when belief becomes a chain and silence becomes survival, we are all vulnerable to the flames. As you blow out the candle that guided you through these dark corridors of history, ask yourself, how many of these patterns still echo in our world today? And how easily might they rise again, cloaked in new justifications? If you found these revelations as haunting as I did, do not let them vanish into silence. Like this video, share it with those who dare to look into the shadows, and subscribe to Dark History Archive. Together, we will continue to unearth the secrets buried in blood, stone, and fear. For in remembering the darkness, we guard against its return.